I really felt like that was the first time that that was my voice, it was my words, it was my creative vision, and really it just soared from there.
Welcome to Art in the Raw, the podcast that explores the bold, unapologetic, and often unseen art of queer creators. I'm your host, David Smith. Each episode, we sit down with queer artists from different disciplines to explore their inspirations, their struggles, and the narratives that shape their work. What does it mean to truly be free in your body? To embrace every part of yourself, your art, your identity, your desires, without apology. Today's guest, Donald Shorter, has built his creative world around that very question. Donald is a multidisciplinary artist, performer, and kink educator whose work boldly explores identity, leather culture, and radical self-acceptance. You might know him from the Broadway stage, La Cage, A Chorus Line, Hairspray, or from the contemporary dance world, where he's performed with Philadenko, the Bill T. Jones Arnie Zane Dance Company, and more. His art has been showcased everywhere from the Pompidou Center to the Tom of Finland Foundation, always challenging boundaries and celebrating queer liberation. But Donald isn't just here to perform. He's here to educate and empower. As a proud leather boy with a deep passion for BDSM culture, he leads workshops on impact play and submission at Claw and beyond, helping others to find their own path within leather. His latest work focuses on the intimacy, vulnerability, and humanity within BDSM, breaking down misconceptions and showing the deep connections forged through kink. So if you think you know what leather culture is, think again. Donald is here to take us beyond the surface, and I promise you're going to want to hear this conversation. Donald, it is such a pleasure to have you here. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
I'm excited to get to talk to you. We've kind of been, seeing each other around the leather circuit for a little while, and this is the first chance I think we've had to talk about your art. So I'm excited.
Cool.
So your work is described as autobiographical, kind of addressing themes such as race, gender, sexuality, and gender expression. Could you share with us how your personal experiences with these things have shaped your artistic journey?
Yeah, I mean, I think when I first started off as like a professional dancer, right, and being in musical theater and concert dance, I was speaking the words of someone else. I was singing someone else's songs. I was dancing someone else's steps. And that all helped to inform sort of what would later become sort of my own voice artistically. But
Mm-hmm.
in finding my own voice, I found that it was there was a lot more clarity to connect my art to what I was experiencing in the world, and that's just kind of how I found my way as a creative person.
Did you feel hesitant to show people your voice for a while, even after you found it?
No, I think that my first one woman show was called Genderosity, and it was
Mm-hmm.
about looking at deconstructing gender and looking at someone's life who was gender nonconforming and sort of the societal implications around that. Good, bad, and the ugly, right? And I just found that many people weren't making work that addressed those themes. And for me, it was like I didn't necessarily feel like doing something that someone else was doing, although I feel like everything's been done before. But I felt for me, that's where I just artistically had a pull, was to sort of go with what you know, go with your lived experience.
Yeah. That was your drag persona, Francesca, right?
Yes.
Yeah. How did that play a role in your performance? How does Francesca embody your exploration of gender identity?
Yeah, I think that Francesca essentially, I haven't done drag in a while, but essentially at the time it was a container, right? Like it was like I could be a glamour queen, I could be like a club kid, and I could do drag numbers that explored the world of David Bowie or Diana Ross, and it
Mm.
was sort of like this space where I could just be whatever I wanted to be because society told me that I had to be this or that. And so then Francesca in drag was like, I can be everything and anything. So it was a very freeing place to be. And there's like a really special transformative power that drag has, that for whether you're doing on whatever scale, or if you're a drag king or a drag queen, or sort of like, non-binary, it just has such a magical power where you can just unleash your greater self.
Your inner self. Yeah. Like RuPaul says, drag reveals who you are in very much a real way. So you also used to be a member of the Bill Jones and Arnie Zane dance company. Did that experience influence Francesca or your portrayal of her?
I think at the time, I would say definitely working with Bill T. Jones informed my own creative practice in terms of how I work interdisciplinary, right?
Hmm.
Because Bill T. Jones uses multiple disciplines within his choreographic process, in terms of how a piece comes about and sort of what becomes inside of that performance. And so I was inspired by that, but also at the same time, during that time, Francesco, I didn't necessarily feel like I was able to maybe express my gender that I wanted to when I was dancing there at
Hmm.
that time. So then Francesca became this other place where I could like not have to worry about maybe appearing more masculine as a dancer.
Are you still doing dance?
Yeah, yeah,
Love that.
yeah.
So you did mention kind of choreography. We talked about dancing, but you've also done some writing, directing. You've done some singing, some acting, filmmaking, even a professor. So how do you're very busy, and I love that about you. How do you integrate all those various roles into the creative process, though?
Yeah, I mean, I think it really, for me, it boils down to when there is something artistically that comes to me, I always think, well, what is the clearest way I can transmute that or transmit that to people who would engage with it, right? So
Hmm.
sometimes the idea could be very sort of just one thing, right? Like, okay, it's just a song, right? Or then it's sort of like, well, maybe there's something that requires speech, and or maybe it's a movement idea, or maybe it's just a film idea, right? So and then sometimes it's like, well, maybe it's a live element that is going to incorporate dance, theater, and film, right? So it's not, I don't always go into a project knowing exactly sort of like what the end result will be. Sometimes I do see I'll see it and know sort of that's where I want to go. But it really just depends on sort of what is the thing that I need to say, and then I think about how it can be sort of explored artistically.
So talk about that for a minute. You talked about when you start a project, you're not quite sure exactly what it's going to turn out to be, but how do you how do you come up with an idea for your next project, and how do you know which direction you maybe want it to go, even if you don't know where it's going to end?
Yeah, I mean, I think for the one act play that I recently sort of wrote, directed, and performed last year, um, there was a short film called State of Mind, right, that you talked
Mhm.
about, where essentially, I don't know, I saw sort of like two leather people engaging in BDSM. I knew that I didn't want it to be so literal. I wanted to sort of be like an abstract, poetic, visual representation of the feeling that one can have inside of BDSM.
Mhm.
And so then from there, I saw vignettes, and then I heard music, and then I worked with a cinematographer, Max, and then we came up with a shot list, and then we were on set and we thought, okay, it's going to be black and white. And then sort of he brought some creative ideas to it. And then we got the final product out of there. From there, I wanted to take these two people that you'd seen in the film, and there's a photography series that hasn't been released yet, but we see the two individuals again, sort of in sort of once again, sort of a photographic vignette series. But
Mhm.
then I felt that, what if we get to hear these people talk? Like how can we further sort of understand their relationship if we were sort of be let into their world. And so then that's where the idea came to me to create a one act play where we meet these two people and you sort of see them navigate a daddy boy dom sub relationship, and with the submissive, essentially we get to sort of see him vacillate between the relationship between his dom daddy and then his own biological father. So it just, and so once again, that's where the autobiographical element of my work comes into play, because it is taken from various aspects of my life as it
Yeah.
relates to having, a daddy who's a dom, and then sort of, how I got there sort of with my own sort of relationship with my biological father. So that's sort of how we get to where we get with different sort of like parts of like my creative practice.
Did do the dom and the sub in the movie know each other at the beginning, or do you go through the process of how they come to
I
know each
think
other?
for the short film, which is I think only maybe 4 minutes, I think there's no, I mean, the exposition is just that there's just two leather people and you just sort of see them engage in BDSM, right? And so I think that's why when we have the one act play, you get to understand more about their relationship, who they are, sort of why they're doing what they're doing, and sort of what their aims are as a result of that relationship.
Why did you choose black and white versus color?
I mean, I think that, I don't know. It's so interesting, right? Because I felt that I was really inspired by Marlon Riggs' Tongues Untied. And so essentially, two black leather men, sort of like we sort of see in Tongues Untied, there's sort of a black and white sort of vignette series once again, where you have two black men sort of on film. And
Hmm.
then it was interesting when I was sort of like doing my artist residency at the Thomas Finland Foundation last year, that like it was all inspired by sort of like graphite on paper, right?
Hmm.
And that's all in black and white. So then I was like thinking about sort of like the homoerotic sort of genre, right, in terms of visual art. Like all of that work essentially when it first started was in black and white, even when you go back to the physique pictorial magazines,
Hmm.
which were all shot in black and white. So I thought that there was this like really sort of like interesting sort of like lineage of black and white that was connected to sort of, sort of the visual art of the homoerotic genre as it first started out. But I also just thought it would be a very striking. I think the cinematographer Max and I just thought it would just be a really striking image to sort of have the black and white, because we were also on a white background as well. So
Hmm.
I just think in terms of like color and opposition, it was just striking.
Nice. Do you think um, that the film says something about specifically about black men of color in the BDSM scene versus cisgender white men, which is the normal, most seems to be most popular?
Yeah, I mean, I think that that was intentional for me to work with Sir Malice, right? To sort of have sort of essentially thinking about like representation for the leather community in media, right? That I wanted to present something that I hadn't typically seen, right? So that's why I was like all for us being able to work together in that capacity. And I think that sort of is one of the reasons why the film also has done really well,
Hmm.
because of the fact that we normally don't see that sort of element of two black leather men.
Yeah. Did you know Sir Malice before casting for it? Did you
I
have
did
a
not.
chemistry with him?
I did not. I True story is that I actually was going to work with my really good friend and sort of like mentor, Dark Wolf, who's like editor in
Mhm.
chief at Drummer Magazine. And I want to say this was like 2019, maybe 2020. And this was before vaccines had come out. And so at the time I was living in Dallas, right? And so I planned to go to New York to do this like day shoot where we're going to shoot the short film and then
Mhm.
some stills after. And the day before the shoot, Dark Wolf like messages me and is like, "Oh my God, I got COVID."
Oh no.
And so I'm like, I don't live in New York. I'm here literally for like 2 days. And it was like, who do we know? And so then he suggested Sir Malice, and it just so happened that he was available, and like we made it work.
Did you want Sir Malice to bring his own experience to that film, or did you want to showcase your side of the story
I
as a
think
boy?
I think essentially what we did was is that like the film is staged, right? So it's like I'm not. I've told people like I'm not. I wasn't on set all day in like subspace. Like it was like we knew we wanted to sort of capture some scenes, and we he had such a wide sort of like skill set in terms of BDSM.
Hmm.
So his what he wears in the film is those are that's his gear, right? What I wear in the film is my gear, sort of the implements and sort of all of his tools that he brought were all his. And it was really important for me to work with another leather person and not an actor. And so we just sort of we just sort of talked about sort of what each vignette would be and just sort
Hmm.
of say like, this is not about sort of being in a scene, but just how can we sort of restage or replicate and just bring a little bit of intentionality about what we wanted to capture when we were filming.
Yeah. Um, what things do you think maybe you were hesitant to show, or was there anything that you were hesitant to show in that
I mean,
medium?
yeah, I mean, I think because because it's me, right? And I sort of like exist in sort of like educational spaces and I feel like sometimes I have to sort of like straddle the line of sort of like what I really would want to versus sort of what thinking about sort of it's just a fine line.
Yeah, I
Um,
can imagine.
there was no nudity. I will say that I was down to a jock strap, but
Uh-huh.
I think maybe if it was someone else, um, if I cast someone else then who was the sub or the boy, then that might have been different. But I don't know. I kind of like the fact that like it straddles that line a little bit, and I think that also brings intrigue to the film because I think it in many ways could be easy to go the other direction and see everything and like do all the things, but then I think that to me it brings in that erotic element where we sort of like we just kind of tip it a little bit, but not we don't insert the whole thing.
How long did it take you to film?
We did like I think it was like 2 to 3 hours.
Oh, it's not bad.
Yeah.
Yeah. How was showcasing State of Mind at film festivals? Like how did that shape your connection with audiences?
It was incredible, and I was very sort of like we made it and we sort of put it out to the universe and had no idea about its how it would be received. And I mean it was absolutely amazing. I went to Cineking Film Festival, New Fest, which is here in the city. I went to Inside Out Festival in Toronto. It was in the Hump Film Festival, and it was just amazing to be able to be in Seattle Queer Film Festival to sort of,
Mhm.
go to various queer communities and see it was so well received. I mean, I think a lot of people are just, I think they are sort of really grateful to see a certain level of representation from people inside of the leather fetish kink BDSM communities,
Mhm.
being able to sort of create work that represents us. And then also, like, once again, like, I just think it's just a really beautiful piece. And I think people really appreciate that.
Yeah, agreed. Were there any surprising reactions or conversations that came out of all that that stood out for you?
Yeah, there was a really interesting sort of like at Seattle Queer Film Festival, an older black gentleman, kind of had he had an adverse reaction to seeing it. And he just sort of was like, well, what do you think this says about the perception of people of color, in white spaces?
Hmm.
And I just said that, it's my hope that for anyone who is a person of color who is interested in exploring leather fetish kink and BDSM, that they would be able to see that there is that lane and that space for us to explore our sexuality and express it in this way. And I also just had just expressed that like I can't also go through life constantly worrying about what other people are going to think of me and always kind of having to censor that. And in the title card, the beginning title card just talks about, because I think that one of the things that I sort of um, often have some issue with is that we see a lot of these really sexual images um, that allow us to sort of like destigmatize our desire and our sexuality and wanting to express that. But sometimes I feel that like no one's really talking about how do we sort of navigate that in ways that are safe, sane, and consensual, right?
Hmm.
So the beginning title card talks about like, BDSM can be sort of a spiritual pathway to transformation. If there is a solid foundation of trust, honesty, and communication, so you can practice it in ways that are safe, sane, and consensual.
Yeah.
So, that was important to me to sort of have at the beginning of the film. So yeah, but that was the only person that, yeah, at least verbally expressed to me in a Q&A.
You mentioned destigmatizing the fetish, and I've often wondered myself if the fetish becomes destigmatized, does that take the power out of the fetish for the fetish practitioner?
Mm.
Do you have any thoughts on that?
No, I mean, I think for me, it's just how do we destigmatize guilt and shame around wanting to explore those aspects of our desires.
Yeah.
So I say, like, yes, we need visual representation of the erotic arts. We do, because so many people are like, well, I have so much guilt and shame that I could never do that, but I want to do it. And then they live a life and they don't ever do it.
Yeah.
So it's like if we're able to sort of see our desires and our sexuality expressed, in front of us, then we say, okay, I want to do that. I want to explore that. And it gives us agency, and empowers us to be able to explore
I
those
like
things that
that.
we that
Get
we may not on our own.
Yeah. I like that. It gives people the agency to explore without the stigma of the guilt. I
Yeah.
like that. Um, so let's change subjects a little bit. You kind of had a really kind of amazing career on Broadway, touring in those various shows we mentioned earlier, Hairspray, La Cage aux Folles, and Chorus Line. How? Tell me what that experience was like doing that. How
Um,
was it? Scary? Was it fun? Was it
yeah, I
creative,
mean,
or were you kind of held into a box and doing things in a certain way that somebody else wanted you to do it?
no, I will say that I did the three Broadway tours of Hairspray, A Chorus Line, and La Cage, over the course of 5 years. And
Hmm.
so, I mean, I was living the dream. I was in my 20s. I was like, I'm in New York and I'm going to do it. I will say that, like, for every one tour, there was probably 40 to 50 auditions, like, of just auditioning for shows and then landing, the tour. And so it's a lot of work, it's a lot of stress, there's a lot of highs, there's a lot of lows. So when you do land like a Broadway tour and it's a first national or a second national, it's like such a big deal. It's such an achievement, it's such an accomplishment. So when I'm on tour, I always see it as such a gift. And
Hmm.
so, I always show up to work and like ready to hit the show. I had a blast. I mean, I think that 8 shows a week is very challenging when you're on like a Broadway tour. On Broadway, you have 8 shows a week, but you may sort of have you may have 2 shows on Wednesday and 2 shows on Saturday and one show on Sunday. But when
Yeah.
you're on a Broadway tour, because of the way that whatever city that you're in and the way that ticket sales work, you have to do 2 shows on Saturday and 2 shows on Sunday. So that's what we call a 5-show weekend. And it's just really hard because, you have basically you travel to whatever city you're going to be in on a Monday, and then you do a show Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, 2 Saturday, 2 Sunday. So there goes your
Wow.
8. And then if you're understudying, then you're going to have an understudy rehearsal at some point in the week, usually on a Wednesday or a Thursday for 4 hours. So it's a lot of hard work, but I mean, I don't know, it's such a thrill, it's such a rush, it's so awesome to be able to perform and have the audience applaud and just to be living the dream. I love it. I loved it. Yeah.
That sounds like a brutal schedule, man.
Yeah, it does depend on the show. I mean, I was in dancing shows, so yes, like that's a lot of extensive labor on the body, but
Hmm.
it also was like amazing to like go to a city for anywhere between 2 to 6 weeks and live and get the culture and go to bars and restaurants and it just I don't know, it's just I love it.
So let's talk about navigating the world as a gender non-conforming individual and how that presents unique challenges to your art. What have been some of the most significant obstacles you faced with regards to that, and how has it maybe influenced your work?
Yeah, I mean, I think being sort of identifying as queer and gender nonconforming, I think that there is a level of discrimination, right, that one has to face in terms of employment, right, and education, and housing, right, dealing with family and friends, right? Is that something that they're going to understand and accept in terms of sort of maybe thinking about pronouns, right? Or accepting maybe in terms of how you dress, right? Some people may have a really hard time um, seeing you express yourself in that way. So sometimes that could just feel like there's a lack of acceptance or respect or tolerance around how you want to present yourself to the world and have others receive you.
Mhm.
I mean, I think as an educator working in academia, as a queer person, as a gender nonconforming person, as a person of color, as it relates to my scholarship and my research, which is all about queer identity and queer expression, that sometimes it can be hard for if you're sort of working on a tenure track and working towards tenure and promotion. Is your tenure and promotion committee, are they going to understand or value your research, right?
Mhm.
If you're in the ways that you're exploring um, your research and expressing it. So I would say that um, there has been, a lot of challenges in terms of dating inside the community. Maybe I think in my one woman show, I sort of have a monologue about how, I was dating a guy and then told him later that, I was, a drag queen. And then, that relationship just ended like flat,
Mhm.
and the guy just like ghosted me, disappeared, And so it's just really, there's a lot of challenges to overcome. But I would say that the really important part about navigating that is the communities in which I'm able to connect with, that I identify with, right? So the drag community or like the leather community,
Mhm.
right? That those communities hold space for us to be able to find the joy, find the support, and the experience, right? To be able to continue to move through the world.
Do you try to address this with your students as an educator?
Yeah, I mean, I think as an educator, I'm definitely working with students to think about how, like, what is community, right? Like, yes, we're here for a semester in each class, but what does it mean for us as a learning community? We sort of work to sort of create a shared narrative about
Mhm.
what we want our community to be, and sort of everyone has a part to play in upholding and shaping that community, and also working to identify what isn't community,
Right.
right? And also, I say that, like, listen, like, as much as this is about you guys needing to feel safe and so you can succeed in the classroom, it's also about me feeling safe in the classroom. I need to feel safe. I need to feel, valued and respected, Um, and just because I may not have a certain look of what you think a professor should be doesn't mean that I'm deemed less intelligent, and not, I deserve the same amount of respect as any other professor.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Um, can you share a moment in your career that you consider a breakthrough where you felt like your work finally truly resonated with the audience you were addressing?
Yeah, I'll go back to genderosity. I mean, I really felt like that was the first time that that was my voice, it was my words, it was my creative vision, and really it just soared from there. So I want
Mhm.
to say that that was probably 2014. That was the first time where I really felt that like I had found my artistic voice and was then just going to continue to take that forward. And that's when it really became, oh, okay, so like, really speak to the lived experiences that you are connected to in the world.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Um, looking ahead, what are your aspirations for the future for your art and for activism?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, the two go hand in hand because I am speaking about my lived experience being a marginalized person, and so all of those marginalized communities that I'm a part of are represented in my work in one way or another. And so I'm always going to present those lived experiences in my work and then support and uphold other people who come from those same marginalized communities. So I think right now, what I want to do is I have a short documentary called Boys that features the lives of four leather boys, two leather daddies, and
Mm-hmm.
one kink therapist, Mr. Texas Leather, Dr.
Ah,
Ty.
Dr. Ty.
Yeah, so that's actually doing really well. It's been on a few of the film festival, like film festivals, on the circuit.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but what it's been really doing is I've been doing a lot of community screenings in the leather community, and it's been like so amazing, like to be able to go to Claw or virtual Claw or Claw in Cleveland or LA Claw, and working with other leather organizations to screen the short documentary in those spaces and have conversations and hold workshops. So that's been like really powerful and really amazing, and everyone in the community loves it. And as a person in the community, I'm always trying to think about how can I help serve the community. So this is sort of like an act of service, which I think is it's such an honor to sort of like do that. And
Love it.
then I have the one act play called I'm looking at the script right here, Daddy's Boy. And I got to do that once for my artist residency. It was a one-time performance. And so I'm really looking forward to being able to get that back up on its feet and think about sort of like casting, and working as a director. And then I have a series of photographs that I worked with kink Brooklyn-based photographer Benjamin Fredrickson. So I
Mm-hmm.
really want to have this like photographic series be exhibited at a gallery here in New
Wow.
York City and around the world. And so that's kind of what's next. I do feel, because I have been in such a like a movement embodied like dance space, that maybe
Mm-hmm.
there is something that I can connect with in regards to dance, although that hasn't necessarily sort of like come to the forefront of what that idea would be.
How do you hope your works will impact future generations, especially within the queer and gender non-conforming communities?
I mean, I think that I hope that I can inspire the next generation to just like make what you want to make. You know, don't even worry about sort of like the end goal. Just get it out and share it with the world, because you just never know the path that that project may take. But if it doesn't exist, then it can't go anywhere. So
Correct.
I just hope that the next generation will just be inspired to just create what it is that they want to create, and that is enough.
All right, listeners, it's that time, the end of our interview. We turn up the heat and get to real, raw truth. These are inspired by the questions that were made on the Inside the Artist Studio, but I've got my own twist on them. So I've got 10 questions for you. What is your favorite artistic medium or tool?
Dance.
What artistic trend or cliche do you wish would disappear?
I don't know. Come back.
What fuels your creativity the most?
Conflict.
What sound or noise instantly inspires you?
The piano.
Mm. What sound or noise completely kills your focus?
Mm. Jackhammering.
What's your favorite word or phrase to include in your work, literally or metaphorically?
Who are you?
I like that one. If you could see any other queer artist, living or dead, honored with a major public monument, who would it be?
Sylvester.
Sylvester, I love that. Make me feel real. What is one profession or creative field you could never see yourself in?
Lawyer.
If your art could take a life of its own, what form would it take?
Mm. Money.
And finally, if an afterlife exists, what do you hope your art says about you to those who find it in the future?
Peace, joy, love, and freedom.
I love that. We could all use a little bit of that.
Yeah.
Donald, it's been a pleasure. I really appreciate you joining me for this. Always good to talk to you, my brother.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Thanks for listening or watching. If you love this show, be sure to subscribe and leave a review. It helps us bring more visibility to queer artists and their work. And check out our website at salonnatural.art for more queer art events and discussions.